keep people in the dark, in a state of unstable balance, never revealing the underlying motives of your actions. By remaining ignorant of what you intend to do, they will be unable to defend themselves. Lead them far astray down a false trail, shroud your actions in fog, and by the time they realize your intentions, it will be too late.
Use decoys and diversionary maneuvers to throw people off the scent.
If, when you are deceiving, people for some reason get even the slightest shadow of suspicion, everything is lost. Do not give them the slightest opportunity to sniff out where you are going, confuse the trail, plant signs leading down a false path. Do not neglect false sincerity, make ambiguous statements, and place decoys to mislead. He who is unable to distinguish truth from falsehood will not be able to understand your real goal. For several months, Ninon de Lenclos, a 17th century French courtesan with the worst possible reputation, patiently listened to the Marquis de Sévigné talk about his efforts to win over a beautiful but inaccessible young countess. Ninon, who was already 62 years old at the time, was more experienced in matters of love than anyone. Unlike the 22-year-old Marquis, handsome, energetic, but lacking any romantic experience. At first, Ninon was amused by the Marquis's stories of his mistakes, but eventually she grew bored. She did not tolerate stupidity and clumsiness in anything, least of all in the art of seduction, so she decided to take the young man under her wing. First, he needed to understand that this was a war, and that the charming countess was nothing less than a fortress. To break her resistance, military cunning was necessary. Every step needed to be planned and executed with maximum attention to detail and nuance. In discussing the beginning of hostilities with the Marquis, Ninon instructed him to maintain an indifferent expression when approaching the countess closely. The next time, she taught, when alone with the countess, the Marquis should assure her that he was her friend and not a potential lover. This was required to lull her vigilance. The Marquis's interest would stop seeming self-evident to the countess. She might even think he was only interested in friendship. Ninon then developed the next stages of the plan. Once the countess was confused, she needed to be made jealous. Next time, at a grand Parisian ball, the Marquis should appear with a beautiful young companion. She had equally charming friends, so now the countess would constantly see the Marquis surrounded by the most dazzling beauties of Paris. The countess would not only burn with jealousy, but she would also see the Marquis in a new light as a man desired by others. Ninon had to work hard to make the Marquis understand this, but she patiently repeated that a woman interested in a man wants to see that he is also desired by other women. This not only increases his value immediately, but makes the process of conquest much more interesting and satisfying. Now that the countess was supposed to begin feeling jealous and plagued by uncertainty, it was time for a diversionary maneuver. Following Ninon's instructions, the Marquis began skipping balls and gatherings where the countess expected to see him, but instead unexpectedly showed up in salons he had never attended before, salons the countess often visited. Let her fail to anticipate his actions. All of this would plunge her into emotional turmoil, a harbinger of surrender. At first, everything went according to plan and took several weeks. Ninon monitored the Marquis's progress. From her spies, she learned that the countess laughed more heartily at his jokes and listened more attentively to his stories. She was informed that the countess suddenly began asking questions about the Marquis. Friends reported that at balls, the countess looked for the Marquis and followed him around. Ninon was confident that the young woman was under his spell. Now it was just a matter of weeks, maybe a month or two, but everything was on track. The fortress was about to fall. A few days later, the Marquis visited the countess. They were alone. Suddenly, he completely changed. Obeying his own impulse, forgetting Ninon's teachings, he grabbed the countess's hand and confessed his love to her. The woman was embarrassed. He expected a different reaction. She became coldly polite. For the rest of the evening, she tried not to meet his eyes and soon excused herself, wishing him a good night. When he visited her again, he was told she was not home. When she finally agreed to meet again, Both felt awkward and could not find the right tone. The spell had been broken. Ninon de Lenclos knew everything about the art of love. The greatest writers, thinkers, and politicians of her time were among her lovers' names, such as La Rochefoucauld, Molière, and Richelieu. As she grew older and her fame spread, France's finest families sent their sons to her for training in the art of love. Ninon knew that despite the differences between men and women, their reaction to attempts at seduction was generally the same. Deep down, they feel that they are being tempted, but give in because they enjoy feeling led. It is a pleasure to let go of the reins, to relax, to allow another person to lead them into the unknown. Everything in the art of seduction, however, depends on ambiguity. You must not reveal your intentions, must not express them directly in words. Instead, you must mislead your target to make them willingly follow you. You must confuse and perplex them. You must send false signals, pretend to be interested in someone else, a decoy, hide your interest in the target, feign indifference, and so on. This behavior not only misleads, but also increases intrigue towards you. Imagine the same story from the young countess's point of view. After several moves by the Marquis, she felt he was playing some kind of game, but this game enchanted her. She did not know where he was leading her, but she was ready for anything. His actions intrigued her. Each step made her wonder what would follow, and she even enjoyed her jealousy and confusion, for sometimes any feeling is more valuable to us than the boredom of safety. The Countess may have suspected the Marquis's hidden intentions. These are common among most men. But she wanted to wait and watch, and perhaps, if he could have stretched that waiting long enough, it would no longer matter to her what her partner truly wanted.
But from the moment the Marquis chose to utter the fatal word love, everything changed. The game was over, replaced only by the direct demonstration of passion. His intentions were exposed. He truly wanted to seduce her. All his previous actions, until then intriguing, even enchanting, now appeared in a new light, seeming ugly and cynical. The Countess felt confusion, emptiness. The door slammed shut, never to open again. Try not to be known as a deceiver, though nowadays it is impossible to live without being one. Your greatest cunning must consist in not showing your cunning. In 1850, young Otto von Bismarck, a 35-year-old member of the Prussian Parliament, was at a turning point in his career. On the agenda was the unification of several states, including Prussia, into which Germany was divided, and war against Austria, a powerful southern neighbor, invested in a weak Germany and threatening invasion if unification occurred. Duke Wilhelm, heir to the Prussian throne, supported war, and the Parliament was unanimous, preparing for army mobilization. The only opposition came from King Friedrich Wilhelm IV and his ministers, who preferred not to aggravate relations with the strong Austria. Throughout his career, Bismarck had passionately supported the idea of a strong and dominant Prussia. He dreamed of uniting Germany, of war with Austria, of defeating the nation that had kept Germany divided for so long. A former soldier, he imagined the military campaign as a triumphant march to glory. This was, after all, the man who would later say, "The great questions of the time will be decided not by speeches and resolutions, but by iron and blood." A fervent patriot, a supporter of military glory, Bismarck nevertheless gave a speech in Parliament at the height of the war fever. The speech shocked many. "Woe to the statesmen," he said, "who begin a war without a cause that remains important even after the war ends. After the war, you will see many issues differently. Will you then have the courage to look in the eyes of a peasant mourning his ashes, a cripple, a father who lost his children?" Bismarck not only continued to describe the horrors of war, but what was particularly strange, praised Austria and defended its actions. This ran counter to everything he had stood for before. The consequences were immediate. Bismarck was against the war. What could this mean? Other deputies were confused, and many changed their minds when voting. As a result, the king and his ministers prevailed, and war was averted.
A few weeks after Bismarck's infamous speech, the king, grateful for his support of peace, appointed him as a minister. A few years later, Bismarck became Prime Minister of Prussia. In this role, he eventually led his country and the peace-loving king to war with Austria, destroyed the powerful empire, and founded a strong German state under Prussian leadership. Preparing for his speech in 1850, Bismarck calculated the situation thoroughly. First, he understood that, although the Prussian military elite was militaristic, Prussia was much weaker than other European countries. Austria had every chance of winning, which could be disastrous. Second, if the war were lost, Bismarck's political career would be irreparably ruined if he had supported it. The king and his conservative ministers wanted peace. Bismarck wanted power. To achieve this goal, he led everyone down the wrong path, speaking in favor of what he had previously rejected, uttering words he would have mocked had they come from another. He fooled an entire country. Thanks to Bismarck's speech, the king made him a minister, a position from which he quickly rose to prime minister, gaining power, strengthening Prussia's military potential, and finally achieving his goal. Austria was defeated, and Germany united under Prussia's leadership. Bismarck was, without doubt, one of the greatest statesmen of all time, a master of strategy and deception. No one suspected his true aims in this case. Had he announced his actual intentions, explaining that it was better to wait and go to war later, he would not have won the vote, since Prussia was eager for immediate war and mistakenly believed it could defeat Austria. Had he tried to cozy up to the king, offering support for peace in exchange for a ministerial post, he would not have succeeded either. The king, having guessed his ambitions, would have doubted his sincerity. By acting utterly insincerely, sending false signals, he deceived everyone, veiled his true motives, and achieved everything he wanted. Thus, the ability to conceal one's intentions leads to power. Most people are like open books. They say what they feel, blurt out their opinions at every opportunity, and constantly announce their plans and intentions. They do this for many reasons. First, it is human nature to always talk about one's feelings and future plans. It takes effort to restrain your tongue and watch your words. Second, many believe that honesty and openness win hearts and demonstrate good character. This is a great delusion. Honesty, in fact, is a blunt tool that is more likely to crush than to cut. Honesty easily offends. It is much wiser to tailor your words, telling people what they want to hear instead of the crude and ugly truth about what you feel or think. Blind openness leads to becoming so predictable, so understandable, that it is almost impossible to respect or fear you, and power does not submit to a person who cannot inspire such feelings. If you are learning about power, quickly set aside your honesty and begin practicing the art of concealing your intentions. Master it and you will always be in control. The ability to conceal your intentions can be explained by a simple property of human nature. Our first instinct is always to trust appearances. We cannot live constantly doubting the reality of what we see and hear. Endless thoughts that something hidden lies behind appearances would exhaust and terrify us. This makes it relatively easy to hide our thoughts and intentions from one another. Just place in front of people the object you want them to see, the goal you supposedly pursue, and everyone will believe in their reality. If their eyes are focused on the bait, they will miss what you truly strive for. In seduction, offer contradictory signals, such as desire and indifference, and you will not only confuse everyone, but also awaken in people a desire to follow you. Often, a diversionary tactic proves effective, where you appear to support an idea or position that actually contradicts your real beliefs. Bismarck in 1850 used this move with great success. Most will believe that you have sincerely changed your mind, because it is so unusual to play so easily with one's convictions and values. The same applies to any decoy object. Pretend that something is very desirable to you, even though it's actually of no interest, and your enemies will follow a false trail, making mistake after mistake of their calculations. During the War of the Spanish Succession in 1711, the Duke of Marlborough, commander of the English army, wanted to destroy a key French fort that protected major arteries in France. At the same time, he understood that, if the fort were destroyed, the French would realize his true intention to seize this vital road. So he merely occupied the fort and stationed part of his troops there, creating the illusion that the fort was important to him for some other purpose. The French army attacked the fort, and the Duke allowed them to recapture it. As soon as they regained the fort, the French destroyed it themselves so it wouldn't fall into the Duke's hands, thinking it was crucial to him. The fort was destroyed, the roads were left unprotected, and Marlborough passed freely through all of France. You can also use this tactic in another way. Hide your intentions, not by concealing them, which risks appearing secretive and arousing distrust or suspicion, but by constantly talking about your plans and aspirations, just not your real ones. You kill 3 birds with 1 stone. You appear friendly, open, and trustworthy. You mask your intentions, and you send your competitors chasing after fantasies that will waste their time. Another powerful tool to send people down the wrong path is false sincerity. People easily mistake sincerity for honesty. Don't forget, their first instinct is to trust appearances, and since they value honesty and want to believe in the honesty of others, they are unlikely to doubt you or see through you. If you make it seem like you truly believe what you are saying, it gives your words enormous weight. This is exactly how Iago deceived and destroyed Othello. Iago saw the depth of his feelings, his sincere concern over Desdemona's alleged infidelity. How could Othello not believe him? This is also how the brilliant con artist Vale, nicknamed Yellow Kid, misled suckers. It seemed he so genuinely believed in the authenticity of the counterfeit object he was offering, fake stocks, a racehorse purchased at the track, that it was hard to doubt his honesty. Of course, it's important not to go too far. Sincerity is a tricky thing. Overdoing it with too much pathos can arouse suspicion. Remember moderation. Try to be convincing and realistic, or your ruse will look like the deception that it actually is. To make false sincerity an effective weapon for concealing your true intentions, support the belief in honesty and openness as important societal values. Make public declarations. Emphasize your position on this issue, occasionally making some heartfelt remark, of course, one that is meaningless or irrelevant. Napoleon's minister Talleyrand masterfully gained people's trust by revealing to them some open secret. This staged confidence a decoy, then allowed him to gain real trust from the other person. Remember, the best deceivers do everything possible to mask their deceitful nature. They learn to appear honest in order to cover up dishonest deeds. Honesty is just one of many tools in their vast arsenal. Make use of a smokescreen to hide your intentions. Cunning is always the best strategy, but the best cunning requires a smokescreen that helps distract people from your true goals. A pleasant appearance like the unreadable face of a poker player often serves as a good screen, hiding your intentions behind something cozy and familiar. If you lead a simpleton along a familiar path, he will not even notice how he is lured into a trap. In 1910, Mr. Sam Giesel from Chicago sold his warehouse business for approximately $1 million. He settled into the position of a semi-retired man, managed his real estate, but deep down he longed for the past days when he was engaged in making serious deals. One day, a young man named Joseph Weil came into his office, wanting to buy an apartment that Giesel had put up for sale. Giesel explained the apartment cost $8,000, but he was asking only a deposit of $2,000. Weil said that he would give an answer the next day. In the morning, he came with a counteroffer to pay the full $8,000 in cash. If Giesel could wait a few days, Weil would be ready for the deal. Although Giesel had almost retired from business, he still remained a businessman and wondered how Weil would be able to get such an amount of cash equivalent to $150,000 today in such a short time. It seemed that Weil did not want to answer. He quickly changed the topic, but Giesel insisted. Finally, taking a promise that everything would remain secret. Wall told the following story. Wall's uncle served as the secretary of a club of multimillionaire financiers. 10 years before that, the wealthy gentleman had bought at a low price an estate with a hunting lodge in Michigan. For several years, the estate had not been used, so it was decided to sell it. Wall's uncle was entrusted with this task. For a number of reasons and quite weighty ones, the uncle had long harbored resentment and dislike toward the millionaires. Now he had a chance to get even. He decided to sell the property for $35,000 to a front man. It was Wall's job to find such a person. The financiers were too rich to be upset about the low price. The front buyer could then resell the estate at its real price, about $155,000. The uncle, Wall, and the third person would split the difference among themselves. Everything was legal, and there was a reason to do so. The uncle was merely restoring justice toward himself. Giesel had heard enough. He wished to become the front buyer. Wall responded to his offer without enthusiasm, but Giesel did not back down. The idea of getting a good profit and adding a little thrill captivated him instantly. Wall explained that Giesel would have to put down $35,000 in cash to complete the deal. Millionaire Giesel replied that for him, it was no harder than snapping his fingers. Finally, Wall gave in, agreeing to arrange a meeting between Giesel, the uncle, and the financiers in Galesburg, Illinois. On the train heading to Galesburg, Giesel met the uncle. The latter made a good impression on him, and they discussed all the details of the deal. Wall also brought his partner George Gross, a solidly built man with a belly. He's a boxing coach by profession, Wall explained to Giesel, and Gross is one of his most promising boxers. He decided to take Gross with him to keep him in shape before an important match. For a promising athlete, Gross looked a little strange, grey hair, a beer belly, but Giesel was so fascinated by the upcoming deal that he paid no attention to the unsportsmanlike appearance of the boxer. After arriving in Galesburg, Wall and the uncle went to meet with the financiers, leaving Giesel waiting in the hotel room with Gross, who immediately dressed in boxing gear. Giesel absent-mindedly watched as Gross began a shadow boxing workout. Thinking about something else, he did not pay attention to how, after a few minutes of exercise, the boxer was out of breath. However, his boxing style looked quite decent. An hour later, Wall, his uncle, and the financiers appeared, an impressive group of serious people in solid, expensive suits. The meeting went successfully. The financiers were ready to transfer the property to Giesel, who had already transferred $35,000 to a local bank. Having finished this minor matter, the financiers leaned back in their chairs and discussed big business affairs, now and then mentioning the name of J.P. Morgan as if they were personally acquainted with him. Finally, one of them noticed the boxer in the corner of the room. Wall explained why he was there. The financier noted that he also had a boxer in his circle and named him. Wall laughed and declared that Gross would easily beat him. The conversation turned into an argument, tempers flared, and Wall proposed a bet. The financiers accepted it with enthusiasm and hurried out to prepare their fighter for the match. As soon as they left the room, the uncle pounced on Wall, not holding back in the presence of Giesel. They did not have enough money to place a bet, and as soon as the financiers found out, he, the uncle, would be fired. Wall apologized for dragging him into trouble. However, he had a plan. He knew the other boxer well and expected that for a small amount of money, the boxer would take a dive. But where to get the money to make the bet, the uncle insisted. Without it, they might as well be dead. And then Giesel intervened. Not wanting to ruin his deal over an annoying trifle, he offered his own $35,000 as part of the bet. Even if he lost it now, he would still make up for it after reselling the estate. The uncle and nephew did not know how to thank him. Their own $15,000 and Giesel's $35,000 was just enough to place the bet. In the evening, when Giesel was watching the shadow boxing training of the two fighters in the same hotel room, his mind was occupied with the considerable profit to be made from the double scheme, the boxing match and the estate sale. The fight took place the next day at a gymnasium. Wall laid out the cash, which was locked in a safe for security. Everything happened according to the plan made in the hotel room. The financiers frowned, watching the poor performance of their athlete, and Gisel was already calculating his share of the winnings. Suddenly, the financier's boxer delivered a sharp blow to Gross's face, and he fell. When he lifted himself up, everyone saw a trickle of blood coming from his mouth. He coughed, tried to stand, but froze, lying on the floor. One of the financiers, a former doctor, checked his pulse. Gross was dead. The millionaires panicked. They had to leave before the police arrived. They could be charged with murder. In horror, Gisel ran out of the gym and quickly returned to Chicago, leaving behind the $35,000, which he was glad to forget, considering it not a higher price to pay to avoid being involved in a murder case. He never tried to meet Weil or the other participants in the deal again. After Gisel fled, Gross got up from the floor without any help. The trickle from his mouth came from a pouch hidden in his cheek filled with chicken blood diluted with warm water. The entire con had been prepared by Weil, better known in the United States as the Yellow Kid, one of the most talented swindlers of all time. Weil divided the $35,000 among the financiers and the boxers, also con artists, a pleasant reward for a few days of work. Jehu, king of Israel, pretends to offer sacrifices to the idol Baal. And Jehu gathered all the people and said to them, Ahab served Baal a little, Jehu will serve him much more. Now therefore summon to me all the prophets of Baal, all his servants, and all his priests. Let no one be absent, for I have a great sacrifice to offer to Baal. Whoever does not come shall not live. But Jehu acted with cunning intent, in order to destroy the servants of Baal. And Jehu said, Proclaim a solemn assembly for Baal. And they proclaimed it. And Jehu sent throughout all Israel, and all the worshippers of Baal came. There was not a man who did not come. And they went into the house of Baal. And the house of Baal was filled from one end to the other. And Jehu went into the house of Baal, and said to the worshippers of Baal, Search and see that there is not here with you any of the servants of the Lord, but only the servants of Baal should be present. And they began to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings. But Jehu had stationed outside 80 men and said, Whoever lets any of those I deliver into your hands escape, his life shall be for the life of the one who escapes. When the burnt offering was ended, Jehu said to the guards and the captains, Go in and kill them, let no one escape. And they struck them down with the edge of the sword, and the guards and captains threw them out. And they went to the city where the temple of Baal was, and they brought out the images from the temple of Baal and burned them. And they broke down the image of Baal and destroyed the temple of Baal. And they made it a refuse place to this day. And Jehu destroyed Baal out of Israel. Weil had marked Gisel as the ideal victim long before he actually planned the con. He decided that a staged death in the boxing ring would be the perfect way to make Gisel part with his money and forget about it forever. But he also understood that he had no chance of interesting Gisel directly with a boxing match. So he decided to conceal his real intent and invented the story about the sale of the hunting lodge. In other words, he deployed a smoke screen. On the train and in the hotel room, Gisel's thoughts were entirely occupied with the upcoming deal, the easy profit, and the chance to mingle over drinks with financial titans. He did not pay attention to Gross's poor physical shape at his clearly advanced age. That is the power of distraction a smoke screen provides. Gisel's attention was consumed by the deal. So even though he easily agreed to the story about the boxing match, doubts only began to arise when it was already too late to notice the many obvious signs indicating that Gross would surely fail. Moreover, the outcome of the match was determined by bribery, not the boxer's physical condition. And in the end, Gisel was so overwhelmed by the illusion of the boxer's death that he completely forgot about his money.
What one can learn from the Yellow Kid, that a familiar and remarkable environment makes an excellent smokescreen. Approach your target through a situation that seems completely ordinary: a business negotiation, a deal, a financial intrigue. The victim's attention will be scattered, no suspicion will arise. Then you can smoothly lead him into the second act, onto a downward slope, and he will helplessly slide straight into the trap.
In the mid-1920s, influential military leaders in Ethiopia realized that a young aristocrat named Haile Selassie, also known as the Negus, a shortened title for the Emperor of Ethiopia before the monarchy was abolished in 1975, was surpassing them in the struggle for power, and the moment was approaching when he could declare himself their ruler, uniting the country for the first time in many decades. Most of his rivals could not understand how this elegant, calm man with unimpressive manners had managed to subdue everyone. Yet in 1927, Selassie began summoning the warlords to Addis Ababa to recognize him as head of state and to confirm their loyalty. Some were confused, others hesitated, and only one, Djismok Bauka from Sidamo, dared to openly defy him. Bauka was a hot-tempered man, a true military leader, and considered the new ruler weak and unworthy. He did not appear in the capital. In the end, Selassie, in his usual polite yet firm manner, ordered Bauka to appear. The warlord decided to comply, but to try and upset the calculations of the would-be emperor, he planned to arrive in Addis Ababa with an army of 10,000 men, a force sufficient to ensure his own safety or, perhaps, to start a civil war. Having positioned his warriors in a valley 3 miles from the capital, he waited as though he were a king. Selassie would have to come to him. Selassie did indeed send a message through messengers, inviting Bauka to a reception at the palace in his honor. But Bauka was no fool and knew his history. He was well aware that past Ethiopian rulers and kings often staged receptions that were actually traps. In the palace, Selassie could order him captured or killed. To make it clear that he understood the situation, Bauka agreed to attend the celebration, but only with an escort, 600 of his best soldiers, armed and ready to defend him and themselves. To Bauka's surprise, Selassie responded very graciously, saying he would be honored to welcome such distinguished warriors. On the way, Bauka instructed his soldiers not to drink much and to remain alert. When they arrived at the palace, Selassie was the embodiment of hospitality. From the way he treated Bauka, one could assume that Selassie most needed his support and approval. But Bauka did not succumb to charm and warned Selassie, if he did not return to the camp before sunset, his troops would begin an advance on the capital. Selassie appeared wounded by such mistrust. During dinner, when it was time for the traditional songs in honor of Ethiopian warlords, he ordered that only the warlord from Sidamo be praised. It seemed to Bauka that Selassie was frightened and overwhelmed in the presence of such a great warrior, who had also proven to be incorruptible. Sensing a shift in power, Bauka was already certain that he was now in control. Toward evening, Bauka and his soldiers departed to cheers and a gun salute. Looking back at the capital, Bauka imagined that within a few weeks, his own soldiers would triumphantly march through the city. Selassie would be captured and imprisoned or executed. However, as he approached the camp, Bauka realized that something terrible had happened. Where that morning, as far as the eye could see, multicolored tents had stood. Now only faint wisps of smoke from extinguished fires remained. What kind of devilish sorcery was this? An eyewitness explained what had happened. During the palace reception, a large army under Selassie's ally had approached Bauka's forces via a side road that he had not noticed. However, the army was not there to fight, knowing that if battle noise broke out, Bauka and his bodyguards would rush to the rescue. Selassie's troops came armed not with weapons, but with baskets of gold and money. Surrounding Bauka's warriors, they began to buy their weapons from them. Those who refused were threatened with death. In just a few hours, Bauka's entire army had been disarmed, and the soldiers scattered in all directions. Realizing the danger he was in, Bowker decided to head south with his 600 soldiers to regroup, but the same army that had disarmed his troops blocked his way. The only other option was to march on the capital, but there Selassie was waiting, with a large army ready to defend. Like a chess master, Selassie had calculated all of Bowker's moves and placed him in checkmate first. For the first time in his life, Bowker was surrounded. He ended his days in a monastery, repenting the sin of pride and overconfidence. During his long reign, no one ever fully understood Haile Selassie. Ethiopians appreciate strength in their leaders, even ferocity, but Selassie, with the appearance of a gentle, peaceable man, remained on the throne longer than any of them. Never losing his temper, never allowing fits of anger, he would lure his victims in with sweet smiles, lull them with his charm, appease them before he struck. In the case of Bowker, Selassie played on the warlord's pugnacity and his suspicion that the reception would turn out to be a trap. And it was a trap, only not where one would expect it to be. The way Selassie dispelled Bowker's fears, allowing him to bring his guards to the palace, honoring him, making him feel secure in his position, served as a thick curtain of smoke that concealed his true actions 3 miles outside the capital. Remember, the suspicious and aggressive are often the easiest to deceive. Try to win their trust in one matter, and you already have a smoke screen that blinds them in another, allowing you to creep up and land a crushing blow. Make a noble or friendly gesture, or let your opponents feel their own superiority. These are excellent means for carrying out subterfuge.
A well-placed smoke screen is a powerful weapon. Haile Selassie used it to utterly defeat his enemy without a single shot being fired, fear underestimating the power of Tafari. He creeps like a mouse, but his jaws are like a lion's.
If you believe that deceivers are flamboyant characters, people who lie, trick, and fabricate at every step, you are mistaken. The best among them have a trustworthy appearance and do not attract attention. They know that extravagant words and actions will immediately arouse suspicion. Instead, they present their schemes as something familiar, mundane, and harmless. In the case of the Yellow Kid Vale and Sam Jizzle, the familiar domain was business. In the Ethiopian case, it was Haile Selassie's misleading submissiveness, exactly the kind of behavior Bowker expected from a commander inferior to him in power. Once you lull your victims with what they expected, they lose the ability to perceive deceit happening right behind their backs. This can be explained by a simple truth: people can only focus on one thing at a time. It is too difficult for them to imagine that a pleasant and harmless person simultaneously be plotting something. The more dull and ordinary the smoke you create, the easier it is to hide your intentions. By using the techniques of false leads and decoys discussed in Part 1, you actively mislead people. The smoke screen helps lull the fool and lure them into your web. It hypnotizes, and for this reason, is the best way to hide your intentions. The simplest form of a smoke screen is to face. Hiding behind a likable, unremarkable appearance allows you to plan any wickedness. No one will suspect a thing. Many powerful figures in history have used this weapon. It is known that Franklin D. Roosevelt had a completely unreadable face. Baron James Rothschild used this method throughout his life, hiding his true thoughts behind wide, welcoming smiles or vague expressions. Stendhal wrote of Talleyrand, "There never was a face in the world on which it was harder to read." Henry Kissinger would reduce his opponents to tears at the negotiation table with his monotone voice, blank expression, and endless recitation of details, then suddenly stun them by presenting a list of bold demands. Caught off guard, they would easily allow themselves to be persuaded. As one poker textbook explains, a good player rarely acts when playing his hand. Instead, he assumes a bland manner, so that nothing can be read from his behavior. This confuses and unnerves opponents, forcing them to concentrate harder. The concept of the smoke screen can be applied at various levels, but in all cases, It is about psychological principles of distraction and misdirection. One of the most effective types of smokescreen is a noble gesture. People want to believe in the sincerity of noble deeds because believing so makes them feel good. Rarely do they realize how misleading such actions can be. Art dealer Joseph Duveen once faced a terrible problem. His millionaire clients, who eagerly paid him for his paintings, were running out of wall space. And with inheritance taxes increasing, it looked as if they might stop buying altogether. The solution came in the form of an art gallery in Washington, which Duveen helped create in 1937 by convincing Andrew Mellon to donate his collection to the museum. The National Gallery became a perfect cover for Duveen. In one stroke, his clients avoided taxes, cleared wall space for new purchases, and reduced the number of paintings on the market, thus keeping prices high. At the same time, donors gained a reputation for philanthropy.
Another effective type of smokescreen is the pattern, a series of actions that make the victim believe you will continue moving in the same direction. The pattern plays on the psychological principle of expectation. Our behavior tends to follow patterns, or at least we like to think it does.
In 1878, American criminal Baron J. Gould created a company that began threatening the monopoly of the telegraph company Western Union. The company's directors decided to buy Gould's firm. They had to pay a large sum, but they wanted to rid themselves of the troublesome competitor. However, a few months later, Gould appeared again, claiming he had been treated unfairly. He created a second firm and again began competing with Western Union and its new acquisition. The story repeated itself. Western Union bought this company too. Soon it all began a third time. But this time Gould behaved differently. He launched a brutal takeover campaign and ultimately gained full control over Western Union. Gould's repeated actions misled the company's management. They believed his goal was to make profitable sales. By paying him off, they let their guard down, failing to notice how the opponent was raising the stakes. The virtue of a pattern is that it deceives. It makes others think you are predictable and to expect something other than what you have actually planned. Another psychological weakness that can be exploited to create a smokescreen is the tendency to take appearances for reality. The sense that if someone behaves like you're a lie, then he must truly be one. This makes mimicry an extremely effective tactic. It is a simple trick. You blend in with those around you. The better you do it, the less suspicion you arouse. During the notorious Cold War, many British government officials were passing secret information to the Soviet side. For a long time, they could not be exposed because they were one of the lads, educated at privileged private schools, perfectly fitting into the respectable society of their alumni. Mimicry is the best cover for a spy. The better you master it, the easier it becomes to hide your true intentions. Remember, it takes patience and humility to dim your colors and wear a mask that draws no attention. Do not be disheartened if you must wear an unremarkable guise. Often its inscrutability is what draws people to us and gives us the appearance of someone close to power. To sail the ocean in broad daylight, this means to create a screen that eventually becomes familiar and ordinary. This allows the strategist to act unnoticed, since all eyes are fixed only on what is obvious and familiar. A sheep will not rob. A sheep will not betray. A sheep is incredibly stupid and harmless. With a sheep's fleece on its back, the fox can easily sneak straight into the hen house. Have you ever heard of a skillful general who, planning to seize a fortress, would announce his plan to the enemy? Conceal your goal and do not boast of your victories. Do not let it be known how far your calculations reach until nothing can stop them, until the battle is won. Win the victory before the war is declared. In short, imitate the military men whose intentions are known to no one but the devastated lands they have already passed through in triumph. Neither a thick veil of smoke, nor diversionary maneuvers, nor feigned sincerity, nor any other tricks will help someone who already has the solid reputation of a deceiver. And as you grow older and become more successful, it becomes increasingly difficult to disguise your cunning. If everyone knows that deceit is your go-to method, then trying to appear naive and simple will make you look like a flagrant hypocrite, severely limiting your room for maneuver. In such cases, it is better to confess without pretense that you are a rogue, or even better, a reformed rogue. Not only will people forgive and love you for your honesty, but, most surprisingly, you will be able to continue your deceptions unimpeded. As he aged, P.T. Barnum, the great charlatan of the 19th century, learned how to use his reputation as a master trickster. Once, he organized a buffalo hunt in New Jersey, hiring Native Americans and importing several buffalo from another state. He promoted the hunt as genuine, and although everything looked completely unnatural, the spectators, instead of becoming indignant and demanding refunds, simply had fun. They knew that with Barnum, you should always expect trickery. That was the secret of his success, and they loved him for it. Barnum learned his lesson and stopped hiding his methods, even revealing many of his hoaxes in his autobiography. As Kierkegaard wrote, "The world wants to be deceived. Although it is wise to distract attention from your goals by wearing a colorless mask, there are cases when the better tactic is a bright, expressive gesture or act." The greatest European charlatans and swindlers of the 17th and 18th centuries captivated the public with their wit and charm. Mesmerized by the magnificent spectacle, the audience failed to notice what the charlatan really wanted. One of them would enter a town in a black carriage drawn by black horses. Following him were clowns, still-talking acrobats, and jesters, praising and offering the crowd elixirs and healing potions. Spectators gathered for the show. The charlatan's true goal, however, was to sell the elixirs and potions, which sold quite well. Spectacle and attraction are, without a doubt, excellent ways to conceal your intentions, but they cannot be used indefinitely. The public grows weary, becomes suspicious, and may eventually catch you red-handed. Indeed, charlatans often had to hurry from one place to another before word of their worthless potions could get ahead of them. But people in power with bland appearances, the Talleyrand's, Rothschilds, Kissingers, can successfully use their technique throughout their lives, staying in one place. Their method never wears out and rarely arouses suspicion. A flashy scream can only be used occasionally, when the timing is just right.